Geek Week 7, it's Tuesday. Remember telling you last week that I was going to do a video on jurisdiction, since I'm assuming this is specialty week, but we really have no way to tell. Since, I think, two of us have posted in the past week and a half or something like that. I mean, not really calling anybody out or anything, just kind of noticed like it's been really quiet lately. So I think you remember when I was doing my rant on Article 3 from the U.S. Constitution and how the judiciary is organized, that court would have original jurisdiction in some areas and yet appellate jurisdiction in others. And that's kind of what we're getting at here this week. There are two basic types of jurisdiction in the United States. Matt, I'm not sure how things work in England. And if any of our Canadian or your other European counterparts have anything to lend on this, then please, by all means, enlighten me, because I'm curious. But in the U.S., you have subject matter jurisdiction, which is the ability of a court to hear a certain type of case. And then you have personal jurisdiction, meaning does the court have jurisdiction over you? And in most cases, state courts have courts of general subject matter jurisdiction. So the Franklin County Court of Common Pleas downtown here in Columbus would be a court of general subject matter jurisdiction. They hear several different types of cases. They'll hear divorces. They'll hear criminal cases. They'll hear corporate claims. So that's what I mean by general subject matter jurisdiction. Really kind of broad. Duh. Federal courts, on the other hand, are courts of very limited subject matter jurisdiction. I mean, they only hear cases that involve citizens of two different states. So, say somebody from, I don't know, New Mexico decided to sue me here in Ohio. The case could go to federal court just on the basis of diversity of citizenship. I'm domiciled here in Ohio, so I'm not a citizen of New Mexico, and the New Mexico domiciliary is probably not a citizen of Ohio, so their court can hear that case. Yay! And there's also an amount in controversy, so you have to have like a $75,000 dispute to get into federal court, and that's the bare minimum. I mean, federal courts don't want to waste their time, right? They want to make sure litigation's worth it. The type of subject matter jurisdiction that the federal courts have to worry about is, well, in fact, you don't even really need to worry about it, because if a plaintiff, so in other words, somebody who's going to sue, if they bring an action under a federal law, a federal statute, saying, look, this guy violated the Voting Rights Act. There you go. That gives the court jurisdiction. They want to hear that. It's a federal law that's being violated. So they definitely have jurisdiction over that. And they can attach state claims to that as well, as long as they operate under what's called a common nucleus of operative fact. What the heck does that mean? All it really means is that as long as the state law that's being violated and the federal law that are being violated happened in the same general instance, then the court will hear that just so you don't have to go to two different venues to get the thing resolved. The court will hear it. It'll hear all the actions at once, whether they're federal or not, and resolve them. That's called supplemental jurisdiction. Yay. Worth it. Personal jurisdiction, on the other hand, sounds like it would be relatively simple. No, not exactly. Personal jurisdiction is actually the more tricky of the two. You'd think, well, what if a federal court can't hear, I don't know, XYZ from the state of Ohio? Well, that may or may not be true, right? I mean, depending upon how the case got to federal court in the first place. But whether or not a court has personal jurisdiction is actually a much bigger issue, and it is really at the state level. So again, let's say we have that guy from New Mexico who's really a pain in the butt and he wants to sue me for some reason. I don't know what I did. I'm joking, of course. Nobody from New Mexico ever wants to sue me, and I live a boring life anyway, so I don't know why I'd get sued. But with the New Mexico courts, personal jurisdiction over me. Well, there's old ways of looking at that. There's an old 19th century case called Pennoyer v. Neff, which if you're a law student who's taken any sort of jurisdiction class, you know that it's, well, among other things, notorious. But it set the real basic common law groundwork for personal jurisdiction. That case really just sort of said that, and I'm really boiling this down to the bare bones of what the holding of the case is. There were three types of common law jurisdiction. And one is in personam, which is in-person jurisdiction, right? You are personally served with process when you enter that state, because states, again, are treated as sovereign. So if you're outside the state, the state can't serve you with process beyond its borders, right? The other is in rem jurisdiction, meaning so long as there is any property within the state's borders, they can serve that with process, sort of. And the last is called quasi-in rem. Quasi-in rem just means any sort of action that's going against an out-of-state citizen, recovery is limited to the amount, the amount of the value of any property that is owned within the state's borders. So if I owned a house in New Mexico and this guy from New Mexico is suing me, the court would have probably exercised the common law doctrine of quasi-in rem jurisdiction absent any other doctrine, which the Supreme Court has expounded upon significantly since the 19th century. And see, this is where it gets kind of cool, because with the advent of the internet, right? Well, here, let me go back a little bit. Let me go back about 50 years. So we're back in the 50s, 60s. Okay, so that was maybe 60 years. But 1950s, 1960s, where you have corporations that are still operating across state lines, okay? But you have like salesmen who are going abroad. And somebody sues a corporate salesman in one of the states where the company's not based. And then they decide to bring the company in from out of state for a suit in that state. So this was a big case in I think the mid-50s or late 50s called International Shoe. Then it was a shoe salesman who was in the state of Washington, but his company was based in Missouri. And I don't remember what the actual cause of action was. I think maybe it was like a products liability case or something like that. But the bottom line is that's not what was really at issue when I was reading it. It was, does the Washington court have jurisdiction over a Missouri company? And the answer was yes, because the company had sought to serve the market in Washington, okay, and had established what are known as minimum contacts in that state. So by the company going up there and making a few transactions, so the salesman ordering a few transactions for the company, they have established what are known as minimum contacts. But anyway, guys, that's enough of me rambling about jurisdiction for 1 week. Have a great week, and I'll see you next Tuesday.